Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all on this beautiful sunny day as the grass continues to grow unashamedly and out of control. We've not been able to touch our yard yet, and probably won't for another week or so. So it is what it is, but it's beautiful, isn't it? Always a reminder of God's creation and creativity, and just seeing the flowers pop up and the trees in bloom. It's a gorgeous reminder of who God is. We've been talking about the cycle of loving our neighbors, which is the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbors as yourself. Teaching people who God is, and that's what today's sermon is. If we don't teach people, they will not know. We've got to teach people who God is, how to love God, why to love God, which is the greatest commandment, and move people to serve others. If we're on this earth and we do nothing to help our fellow mankind, we may as well erase that Christian label off of us. Our faith is absolutely dead, according to James. We've got to serve others. Our theme this year is straining toward the goal. I love that theme. I fell in love with that theme when I was kind of digging through the Bible and praying, because this describes life. We are struggling. I don't care at what stage of life you're in. If you're living and breathing, there are days where we struggle. There are months, years where we struggle. And we're all straining toward the goal together as Christians. Our theme verses are Philippians 3:13 and 14. Paul says, "Brothers, I do not consider that I've made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God and Christ Jesus." Do you hear how badly Paul wants this? This is not a casual approach to Christianity where he says, this Christianity thing, it's pretty cool. And I can, I found a church where I can wear my ripped jeans to church and they don't even get on me about that. Paul's not taking this casual approach to Christianity. In the words of one theologian who said, we ought to show up to worship expecting God to do something. And instead of being casual and super laid back, we ought to be wearing a crash helmet ready for God to show up. God is that great. God is that awesome. And I think Paul really captures this urgency to get to heaven and to help other people get to heaven. There's one thing that has always bothered me, and I think you all can relate to this. We don't like death. No, I'll just put that out there. We don't like death. And particularly heartbreaking is when death is premature because people did something because they didn't know. Now, safety reasons or whatever it is. I've driven over 1 million miles on the road. It's nothing that impressive. There are people who have driven many more miles. When I was in truck driving school, back in my younger days, I was just barely 21 years old. I wanted to hit the country and take a year off in between college and grad school. I was single at the time, and so I just did it. I literally just made a decision. I called up a company and I was like, "Hey, I want to work for you." And they were like, "Hey, come to Carlisle." I was like, "Okay." And so I was just barely 21, and I was in my training classes, the classroom setting. There was half a day of sitting in a classroom, and then half a day walking around the truck, and then eventually we jumped in a truck. And in 3 weeks they prepared us to be all on our own. Pretty incredible, very fast training, but very good training. I learned things that I'd been around equipment my whole life. I'd been operating equipment. I worked on a farm full-time from the time I was 11, and I learned so much in that week. And we had a guy named Phil who was a 4 million mile accident-free driver. And it was really cool, really impressive. But sitting at the feet of people who who knew and drinking in information, I am convinced not only saved my life multiple times, but saved the lives of other people around me. You're driving an 80,000-pound vehicle, hurling it down the road at, 65, 70 miles an hour. A lot can happen. A lot does happen. I know. I've had it happen. I've had tire blowouts. I've had all kinds of issues. I've had people come, pull out in front of me. I mean, just lots and lots and lots and lots of things have happened. In that training, they talk about tire blowouts, and I don't know if you guys heard about the RV here in Pennsylvania back in August, up on Interstate 81. It blew a steer tire out, careened across the median, hit a truck driver head on. All 4 inside of the RV died pretty much instantly, and the truck driver died. All 5 people involved in that accident died. One of the things that we learned in school is when you have a steer tire blow out, our reaction is to hit the brakes or to ease off the throttle and do all you can to steer it. Very counterintuitively, you are supposed to not only hit the throttle, but you smash the throttle all the way to the floor as hard and fast as you can, and you initially accelerate to lift weight off of the front end, and then you ease off of the throttle, and then you just kind of coast it off to the side. That saved Tim. I don't know if you ever had a steer blowout, but they're not fun. Fortunately, I never had it happen. I've seen it happen to other drivers out on the road. And every single CDL holder knows that you're supposed to hit the throttle. You smash, it's so counterintuitive, but it saves lives. And there are all kinds of things that I have a whole list here of things where people die because people don't know what you're supposed to do. They haven't been taught. By the way, that same rule applies to cars. It changes a little bit because cars are a lot lighter, so the chances of the weight dropping down so quickly and pulling you off are a little bit less. But in a car, you never hit the brakes. You ease off the gas and then just kind of, steer the best you can. And that's just for a front tire, a steer tire. But here's a whole list of things that people have lost lives because people just didn't know. If you see a service dog and its owner is not around, you don't just walk on and go your merry way. You follow the service dog because likely the owner is in crisis and the dog is doing its job. It's finding people to take them to the owner. If you're in another country, anybody know what number you call on your phone? And this is pretty much universal for any country that any of us will ever go to in our entire lives. If you have an emergency, what number do you call? And your phone will most likely work, even if you don't have a service plan. It'll work for this number. Anybody know the number? I didn't know this number until literally this morning. And apparently this is supposed to be common knowledge. 112. It's an international emergency number that will redirect you to their equivalent of 911. And we actually have 112 in our country too. I never knew that. A tornado. Wow, we lived in Tornado Alley in Arkansas for many years. I've seen tornadoes. I've heard tornadoes. I've done tornado cleanup. They're nothing to joke about. They're pretty crazy. But if a tornado looks like it's sitting still, like it's not moving, does anybody know what direction? Is it actually sitting still? It's moving toward you. Yeah, it's an optical illusion. If you see a tornado that looks like it's standing still, find cover immediately. Some of us have heard this. Probably most of us have heard this. If you get caught in an avalanche and you get buried, your chance of survival increases dramatically if you do this one thing. Anybody know what it is? Any of you kids? Have you ever been taught this in school? You're going to like this one, Cameron. Being a baseball player, you spit. Because when you're caught with that much snow and you're rolled around, your body can't feel it. All of your senses are gone and you can't feel or tell whether you're upside down. And so people just panic and they start to dig, thinking that they're digging up. And you may be digging sideways, or you may be digging diagonal or digging down. You spit, gravity always finds its way to the center of the earth, the core of the earth. That will tell you which way you're facing, and then you dig opposite where the spit goes. Rip currents, this is a huge one. I talk about this a lot. My kids all know. What do you do in a rip current? What else, Isaac? What do you do in a rip current? Swim with it, or just do what? Yeah, just float, just relax, ride it out. You will never swim against a rip current. Many professional swimmers die every single year. Lifeguards. Lifeguards of swimming pools, because they don't know, they don't understand rip currents. You will not swim against a rip current ever. I don't care how big you are, I don't care how powerful you are, I don't care how macho you are. You will never swim against a rip current, and they're terrifying. I actually got caught in a couple in my life. It's a myth to think that it's going to sweep you out to Europe. If you're in the Atlantic, you will not find yourself in Europe. It will carry you out very fast, very far, and then it will stop. Rip currents do not go on forever. And if you just literally lay on your back and relax, ride it out, enjoy the ride, eventually you'll be able to swim out to the side, and you'll be able to work your way slowly back to shore. The reason people die is because they don't know. Power lines. If a power line falls down on the ground right beside you, what do? Anybody know? Put your thumb on it. That's terrible advice. Anybody know? If it drops 6 feet from you, it's on the ground, it's live, it's hot, what do? Stay where you are. If you're in a vehicle, yes, you stay in it. If it drops on the ground beside you, never lift 1 foot off of the ground. Don't walk, don't run. You shuffle your feet, keeping them on the ground. You slowly get away. Within 30 feet of that, there will be no electric charge anymore. The minute you lift your foot off the ground, you're cooked. Literally. You're a goner. You can call 911 if you don't have cell service. Your phone will connect automatically. All carriers have this. It will find the nearest tower of the competition, so to speak. It'll connect to that tower. You will be able to call 911 if you have no service. A lot of people panic because they see there's no service. There's that big line that goes through the bars. Isn't that annoying? Don't you hate that symbol? I'm going to take that symbol off of the phones. But you can still call 911. Here's another one I was taught in truck driving school. Never swerve for an animal. DP had a classmate who passed away because he swerved for a deer and wrapped his car around a tree and lost his life. Never swerve for an animal. Maybe sway, but never swerve. It's much better to hit an animal than to swerve, lose control, and hit a rock or a tree or an oncoming vehicle. Sleep with your door closed. We recently just learned this, believe it or not. Mandy has a friend who lost several family members due to a house fire. They happen quick. And keeping your door shut at night will save lives. Because when you have that door open, oxygen feeds the fire. If you have your door closed, it has a very hard time breaking that barrier to get into your bedroom. Every single railroad crossing has a number on the sign that's a coordinates for that, or a signal or an ID for that specific crossroad. If you ever see a stalled vehicle, which happens a lot, on top of the tracks. We've actually had a lot of accidents right down here below the church building, a lot. You guys would be surprised at how many vehicles have been hit because they get stuck on the tracks or stalled out or whatever. You call 911, you give that number, and they'll radio ahead and they'll stop the train. These are all things that so many lives are lost because people don't know. And here's our text today, and you'll see how this all ties in. Paul's talking about in Romans 10 how the message of salvation is to everybody. It's for everybody in the world, literally. Every living, breathing creature on planet Earth, every living, breathing human has opportunity to be saved. There is no such thing as people who live in certain countries and God doesn't really want them to be saved. Or there's no such thing. God's message of salvation is for everybody. And Paul is making this message. And here's what he says. For Moses writes about the righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? That is, to bring Christ down. Or who will descend into the abyss? That is, to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. All right, Paul's telling people, you've got to confess. You've got to confess with your mouth. You've got to believe. Or else, what? What's the opposite of that? You won't be saved. And to us, this is common sense. Well, of course you have to confess. Of course you have to believe. Just like for me, certain things, or for Tim, or for anybody who's driven truck, certain things are just common sense. You just, you've been trained, you know it, and you're like, well, yeah, of course, you don't swerve for an animal. Like certain things are common sense for us. But there's a whole host of people who just don't know. And Paul says, for with the heart, one believes and is justified, and with the mouth, one confesses and is saved. For the scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. All right? So clearly, it's a message for everybody. And I wish, this is one of those things, and like Mom knows, I go on these rants about the riptides because I just see so many lives lost every year. And I'm like, it's literally the simplest thing in the world to save your life, and that's just lay back and float. I mean, literally the most basic, simple thing in the world, and yet people panic. And I understand it. I'm not picking on people. I'm not making fun. I panicked when when it first got me when I was a kid. I was like, what in the world is this? I knew I couldn't swim against it, and so I just wrote it out. And then, a couple 100 meters or 100 meters or so, you get out there and you're like, oh, well, now it's done. And then, you start working your way back towards the shore. But so many lives are lost around the world every single year because people don't know. That's the only reason, literally, why people lose their lives. And Paul is thinking about this, and there's a sense of urgency, and he's like, man, come on, guys, like, you guys need to hear this. You guys need to know this. And it's one of those things where once you have information, you want to tell people what to do to be saved. Whether that's physically or hopefully or especially spiritually. Right? Like, you want to shout from the rooftops, guys, there are people dying because you just don't know. And I want to tell you what to do to be saved. Paul goes on, he says, how then will they who call on him, and how then will they call on him in whom they have not yet believed? How do you call on the name of the Lord if you've not believed yet? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? Paul's not being cutesy here. He's being quite literal. If they've never heard of Jesus, how are they going to call on his name and be saved? And we could apply that to, I made this list. The same is true for all of these. If people have never heard these things, how do you expect them to respond and be like, oh, well, yeah, that's just common sense? Well, maybe it's not. Maybe most of what we know in life, we know because somebody taught us. Somebody with experience, somebody with knowledge, somebody taught us everything we know, virtually everything we know in this life. And so Paul's saying, how do people believe in him if they've never heard of him? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news, but they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. People need to hear about Jesus to be saved. Period. There was a big event that happened just this weekend, and I didn't know about it. Somehow I missed notifications or emails or whatever went out, but I wouldn't have been able to go anyway. But there was an alumni reunion at Harding Graduate School of Religion in Memphis, Tennessee, because they're permanently closing their doors on that campus. Enrollment has been dwindling down and down and down. Cost of living is going up and up and up. And funding has been going down and down and down. And interest in people going into ministry has taken a dive off a cliff. Churches are not training young people to preach. They're not getting young people excited. There's an excitement factor. I remember having that when I was a kid. I was excited. I was like, man, I want to do this. That excitement factor is not being passed on. People are so casual or even have animosity toward Christianity that they're not passing that excitement on to the kids. And so we don't have people going into ministry. Now, Harding School of Theology is going to transfer to main campus Harding in Searcy. But in the process, a lot of the professors are located in Memphis, and they're not relocating to Searcy. And so now there's a big shortage of professors, and they have to figure out a whole hiring process, and they're going to get new people. And within the churches of Christ, those numbers have already dwindled. And so my guess is they're probably going to get some professors who are not in the Restoration churches to fill those gaps. This is where we are right now as the church. And so Paul's message and that sense of urgency, I think, is still just as urgent 2,000 years later. If people don't hear about Jesus, how can we expect them to confess and call on his name and to believe in him? We've got to be doing a much better job about telling people, teaching people, getting our kids excited about telling people, even if they're not going into preaching ministry. That's not what I'm saying, is that we need to recruit all these preachers. We just need to preach. We just need to tell people. We just need to share our faith. And so many Christians are not doing it. Brent had the passage in class this morning, like, do you keep this light, under the table? Do you hide it? No, of course you don't. The church is supposed to be a shining light on top of a hill. We've got to be telling people about Jesus, about how to be saved, or else they won't know. They can't know. And I want you to catch that sense of urgency as we strain toward that goal and make that a mission, make that a determination in your life, in your personal life, in your family, in your congregation. Make it a priority to tell people who Jesus is. That's your message today. If there's anybody this morning who has not yet taken that step to put Christ on in baptism, or if you have any prayer needs, we'd encourage you to come up as we all stand and sing this song together.